What's up, guys, and welcome to part 2 of this tutorial about Octane volume displacement. In part 1, we learned about all the techniques that we need to accomplish this, and I mentioned in part 1 that I was going to build this from scratch, but as I was about an hour into doing that, I realized that the meat and potatoes of putting this together really only takes a few minutes to set up, and it's actually pretty simple. And the bulk of the time is really just tweaking sliders, changing the seed, moving things around, that sort of thing. And I decided nobody really wants to watch that. So instead, I've opted to do more of a walkthrough through this project that I've already done. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through the shader, show you all the settings, and talk about how it all ultimately got put together. So this one can be a lot faster than the last one, but you can just see a practical example of how I use the techniques from video 1 to put this together. If you're coming to this video and you haven't seen video 1, it might not make a ton of sense. Everything that is used to make this is taught in video 1. So by all means, continue to watch this, but yeah, you're definitely going to need to watch video 1 in order for this to make any sense if you're not familiar with this subject matter already. So with all that said, please like and subscribe if you like this content, and if you want to see more of it. I'm really just getting started on YouTube and trying to get past, we gotta start building up those subs and getting some traffic in here so that this can get to a place where it could hopefully be beneficial to more than just the people watching this video. Maybe I can get a few cents from the AdSense or something like that. So liking and subscribing is super appreciated. Leaving a comment is also really awesome to see the algorithm. With that said, let's jump right into it. All right, so here we are back in Cinema 4D for part 2. I've already got a scene open, and let's just talk about what we have in here. As I mentioned before in part 1, the old way to do what I'm showing you was to use the volume builder. So back in the day when I made these images, I had made a preset called CloudMate that just allowed me to drag and drop a basic setup of this onto any model. So it's just in here under tools and macros. Oh yeah, it already has a torus actually applied to it. So again, that's just a volume builder with the Octane tag, and then I just had settings already dialed in on it that were a good starting point. So that's what you're looking at there. But as I mentioned, I'm not going to be using that technique because as far as I'm concerned, you can consider that deprecated. But just so you know, you can still do that. I guess for, if you happen to be working on a project where you're using the volume builder and you want to do something with volume displacement, it totally works. You just put it on there. If we look at, I could just kind of drag this on here so that you can see that the voxel count in here is pretty high. It really slows down the viewport. But without that, we jump out of our camera, you can see we can say wee, move around. Everything is very snappy. Other than that, I've just got a Octane sky. It just has a solid color in it, this green. I have a single area light. The lighting in here is very simple. Here I've got my projection camera that I projected the texture through. I guess something to be mindful of is that the projection camera and the shot camera obviously don't have to match. This is ultimately the shot camera that I used for the final image, but I projected it way back here. I think these other cameras are just like some other angles that I was playing with. And yeah, that's pretty much the whole scene. So let's jump into the material, I guess, on the outside of the Octane tag. Again, mesh to volume, and my voxel size is at 0.3. So let's jump into this material and jump into our shot cam. And we can just start breaking this down. It's very similar to what I did last time. But as I mentioned in the intro, as I was kind of going through and building this a second time, I realized that probably 95% of the time it takes to make this is just spent just moving sliders around and changing seed and just kind of like moving the texture up and down. And it's just hours of that. And I realized, yeah, nobody wants to watch that. So let's just do a quick breakdown, and I'll just kind of walk you through this and kind of do certain parts of this a chunk at a time. So we've got a same thing, just kind of like an abstract texture here. I did run this through Gigapixel AI, which is one of the Topaz AI suite software. It's basically just used to up-res images and have them still maintain a really high fidelity. It works really well. Lots of people use it. It's very popular. So this allowed me to take just a crappy little texture that I found online and blow it up to something that's 4K and has a lot of detail. Since it's just abstract and I'm using it in sort of an indirect way, it works pretty well. We've got our projection, which you can see that we're using the projection camera, and then a transform. And, you know, I've got some settings dialed in here that probably took a long time for me to sort of like land on this. So again, I'm not going to make you sit and watch me do all that stuff. That's going through a color corrector, which just got some tweaking in there to adjust the colors. And then both of those are going into the absorption and the scattering, the same values. Then, just as in the previous tutorial, we got that also coming out of here into an Octane gradient, which doesn't even have any tweaking on it. So this node actually isn't even really doing anything except for just turning this into grayscale, but it really doesn't matter. And then we've got our multiplier node, which is, again, this gives us a controller to control the amount of displacement. So some things in here that I didn't talk about in the last video is that I adjusted the min and the max on this one. So the min starts at the default of 0, but I changed that to -150, and the max goes up to 150, and then you can see that I've got it completely maxed out. This little bit of code here is also not the default. I think I originally got this from Motion Punk, who is, if you don't know who that is, that's an artist and art director who has a Patreon, who does Cinema 4D tutorials. And yeah, this bit of code is to address that flattening out of the sides that I talked about in video 1. When I did this piece originally, I hadn't figured out the whole thing with the cubes that I showed you in part 1. So you don't need this anymore. This helps with that issue, but it doesn't completely fix it. The cubes that I showed you in the last video completely fixes it so that you don't have any flat areas. So you don't need to bother with this. Just do the cubes that I showed you last tutorial, and you can leave this at the default. But in this example, you're going to see this code. And if you're following along, or if you decide to build this and you're looking at this and saying like, why is this different? That's why. So just know that it's not important. You don't need to do anything there. Okay, so so that's going to be the image projection. And let's just disconnect our displacement altogether first and do a render. let me just check my render settings and see. Let's bring this down. Let's do 256. And let's bring this up to 32. And the rest of that's fine. Make sure we're on path tracing. Don't make that mistake again. All right. So you can see we've got something like this. So let's maybe dock this. So if we come back here, this is the first part of the displacement. So we've got this noise set to wavy turbulence. Let's pause this while we're doing all this. This first noise, wavy turbulence, bunch of tweaking going on. Same thing, that runs through a multiplier, goes from negative 100 to 100. So it's just a bunch of the same thing. I'm not going to keep on repeating it and wasting time just saying the same thing over and over again. But it's just what I talked about last video. It's just that in this example, the settings are already dialed in. So we got our noise that goes through a multiplier. This float is set to 0. And then we've got this as a mask. And so what this is doing is this is the displacement. This is the intensity. This is no displacement. And this is a mask so that the displacement will only be applied to certain areas. So if we take this directly from here and plug this in, a little bit more room, to our displacement, you'll see we get something like this. Starts off with something a little bit subtle. All right. So we get that. So that's kind of like the first layer of displacement. So then if we combine that, now again, something that's different from the introduction to this stuff that I showed last time. But if you've used Cinema 4D noises or Photoshop or much of anything where you're dealing with layering images together, we can do, I only did mixes in the original tutorial, but obviously you can do multiply, you can do add, you can do subtract, you can do whatever sort of mathematical operation that you want to do to combine these textures and get different effects. So I didn't use any multiplies in that original thing, but of course you can use multiply, you can use whatever. So the way that this initial displacement and the projection displacement get layered together is through a multiply. So let's take that and drop that into the displacement. And you can see we get that. It all just kind of explodes. And that looks pretty cool, but we completely lose the figure in this. So what we want is something where we can, again, take this and mask it so that we have some sections of this kind of cool, like blasting away, but we don't completely lose the silhouette and the form of the figure. And so you can see that, okay, so again, that comes in, that gets multiplied here, and then that's going to get mixed with no displacement right here. And then we've got this, which the sort of like result of this is everything's getting blasted. And then we've got another noise here that we're using as a mask. This is a Naki. Global scale is 500. You can see high clip, low clip. These are the main things that are being tweaked to adjust this mask. The global scale, the seed, the low clip, and high clip. And then it's, honestly, probably like hours of tweaking these settings to get things to look exactly how we want. But yeah, so we've got this and no displacement here with a float of 0. And then this guy cutting that out. And so now if we plug this into the displacement, we get this. So now it's like we've, and the reason that this just, like I said, the time consuming part of this is just moving stuff around, because what I wanted is at least enough of the face. Like, I just want you to basically get the hint of the figure beneath this and just enough information to kind of have like a bit of like lost and found interest in everything. So you can see that this is a figure, but also it's just kind of like this mix of the abstraction, all that sort of stuff. You get it. And that's basically it. So yeah, let me think what else. Yeah, it's actually, again, it might seem kind of complicated in the beginning, but as you can see, it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty simple. This really only has like 2 displacements that are getting mixed and getting masked. And yeah, and we're able to get this sort of, this cool effect. Yeah, honestly, I think that's about it. So like and subscribe if you like this content. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section, or if anything is unclear. So PS edit fix, I did forget one thing. In the volume medium, just these settings. So the density of the volume is really, really high. It's like 10,000. And the volume step length is pretty low, so that we get a lot of detail in here. That's at 0.03. These things will depend on your overall scene scale and like the scale of your model. So just, keep that in mind. But for this particular look, I didn't want things to look wispy. I wanted them to look pretty solid. So the density is really high. Yeah, I mean, all this stuff is covered in the actual material, but I forgot to show you these settings. Okay, now that's it.